It began, as many mistakes in my life have, with a letter. The paper was thick, old-fashioned, sealed with crimson wax pressed into a crest I did not recognize. Inside, written in elegant, sweeping script, was an invitation. It welcomed me to Transylvania. The author claimed to be a nobleman, Count Dracula, who required assistance with acquiring property abroad. The request was strange, but the money he offered was enough to silence my doubts. Or perhaps it was curiosity that silenced them. Tell me, would you have ignored a letter written in ink that almost seemed to shimmer, like it was still wet with blood? The journey to his castle was long and unsettling. The locals in every village I passed would cross themselves when I asked for directions. Some refused to speak altogether, only shaking their heads, muttering words I couldn't understand. Strigoi, one old woman whispered, shoving a small silver cross into my hand before slamming her shutters. By the time I reached the carriage that was to take me the rest of the way, the sun was sinking. The horses were restless, stamping nervously at the cobblestones. The driver avoided my gaze, muttering prayers under his breath, and when the carriage finally rattled into the dense forest, the last trace of daylight vanished, swallowed whole by the mist. Branches scratched against the windows, the trees pressed close, as if trying to keep me out or perhaps to keep something else in. My lantern sputtered, and for a moment I swore I saw shapes in the fog, tall, lean shadows running alongside us, keeping pace. When at last the castle appeared, my breath caught. It loomed high above the cliffs, its jagged towers stabbing the night sky. Lightning split the heavens, illuminating the walls that looked less built than grown from the mountain itself. The carriage halted at the gates. The driver thrust my bags toward me and whipped the horses hard, vanishing into the forest without a word. I stood alone in the cold, the iron gates creaking open by themselves. Do you know the feeling when every instinct tells you to turn back, yet something stronger forces you forward? That's what pulled me across the threshold. The doors opened with a groan, revealing a grand hall lit by flickering candles. The air smelled of dust, stone, and something faintly metallic. And then I heard footsteps descending the stairs. There he was. Tall, pale, with eyes like molten gold that seemed to pierce straight through me. His movements were fluid, almost inhuman, every gesture deliberate. He smiled, showing just the hint of teeth a fraction too sharp. "Welcome," he said, his voice deep and velvet smooth. "I'm Count Dracula. Enter freely, and of your own will." And though the words were spoken like a courtesy, they felt more like a warning. The first night in Castle Dracula was unlike anything I had ever experienced. The Count showed me to a vast chamber, furnished with an ancient canopy bed and thick velvet curtains that smelled faintly of decay. He insisted I rest, though strangely, he made no attempt to eat or drink during supper. Instead, he sat opposite me, hands folded, eyes fixed on me as if studying every detail of my face. Have you ever tried to eat while someone's gaze never leaves you, and blinking, patient, as though they're waiting for you to falter? That was how it felt. The bread turned to ash in my mouth. The wine, though rich and dark, carried a metallic tang I could not name. Later, I lay in bed listening to the silence of the castle, yet it was not truly silent. Beneath the stillness I heard whispers, faint and distant, like voices carried through stone. At times it was laughter, high and sharp, at others low murmurs that felt more like growls. I told myself it was the wind moving through the corridors. But tell me, would the wind ever call your name? I tried to sleep, but dreams came instead. Dreams of pale faces crowding around me, of hands reaching out of the shadows. Dreams of a woman with red lips and eyes that burned in the dark. I woke with sweat chilling my skin, my heart racing. And in the moonlight spilling through the window, I could swear I saw movement shadows that slipped away before I could focus on them. The following days followed a strange rhythm. The Count was a most attentive host, but he never appeared in daylight. Each morning when I rose, he was nowhere to be found. The servants, too, were conspicuously absent. In fact, I began to suspect there were no servants at all. The castle seemed to run itself. Meals appeared, doors opened, fires burned, but I never saw a soul other than him. He showed me his library, a vast collection of ancient tomes and maps. Some were written in languages I couldn't recognize, their letters twisted and alien. One book, bound in leather that looked disturbingly like skin, fell open in my lap, revealing illustrations of winged creatures feeding on men as they slept. The Count only smiled when he noticed me staring. "You will learn much here," he said softly. "Knowledge is power, is it not?" But as his hand brushed mine when he closed the book, my skin turned cold. His touch was icy, the touch of something that had no warmth of life. By the third night, the whispers grew bolder. I began to notice figures at the end of long hallways, women with flowing gowns and eyes like molten embers. Each time I approached, they vanished into the shadows. And when I tried to leave my room, I found the doors locked not from my side, but from the outside. That was the moment I realized I was not a guest, I was a prisoner. And somewhere deep inside, I understood the Count had not invited me here for business. He had brought me here for something far more sinister. "Tell me, what would you have done in my place? Would you confront him? Or would you stay silent, hoping he wouldn't notice your growing fear?" I had begun marking the days by the dwindling candles in my chamber. No matter how often I lit them, they seemed to vanish too quickly, as if time itself ran differently in this castle. By the fourth night, I could bear it no longer. I pushed at the locked doors, shouted into the empty halls, but no one came. No answer except for the laughter that echoed faintly, as though the very walls mocked me. That evening, the Count appeared suddenly, as if he had been waiting just beyond the darkness. His entrance was silent. No footsteps preceded him, no door creaked open. He was simply there. "You look troubled," he said, his lips curling into what might have been a smile, though his eyes betrayed no warmth. "Why am I locked in?" I demanded, my voice trembling despite my attempt at firmness. He regarded me for a long moment, then chuckled, low and dry. "Do you not see, my friend, you are safe here, outside these walls? There are dangers you cannot comprehend." "And inside these walls?" I asked, my heart pounding. At that, his smile widened, and for the first time I saw the faint glint of fangs behind his lips. Not a trick of the light, not a dream, they were real. I stumbled back, nearly knocking over the candle on my table. My breath came shallow, but something in me refused to collapse. "What are you?" I whispered. He stepped closer, his eyes locking onto mine. I couldn't look away. His voice, when he spoke, slid into my mind like velvet chains. "I am many things, a keeper of knowledge, a ruler of this land, but to you." His hand brushed the air near my throat, and I felt an almost magnetic pull toward him. "To you, I am hunger." Do you know that moment when every instinct screams to run, but your body won't obey? That was the grip he had on me. My legs felt heavy, my arms limp. It was as though he could will me into submission with nothing but his gaze. Yet, for the first time, I fought back. I wrenched my eyes from his and stumbled toward the door, rattling the iron handle until my hands burned. Behind me, his laugh filled the chamber, low and satisfied. "Go, if you can," he said softly, "but remember there is no leaving until I allow it." I spun to face him. The Count stood impossibly tall, his shadow stretching across the stone floor like black smoke. His eyes glowed faintly in the candle light, not red, not gold, but something between a color that belonged to no human. The air grew colder, my breath fogged in front of me. And in that frozen silence I heard another sound, a scratching from the walls. Then, from the darkness beyond my door, came the faint giggles of unseen women. The castle itself seemed alive, conspiring with him. "Tell me," he murmured, his voice curling around me like a serpent. "Do you still believe you came here of your own will? Or was it I who drew you across the mountains, step by step, until you stood in my halls?" I had no answer. My throat felt dry, my chest tight. But deep down, a horrifying truth uncoiled. I had never truly been in control. And then he moved closer, so close I could feel the unnatural chill radiating from him. His lips hovered near my ear as he whispered, "The night is long and I am patient, but soon you will be mine." I remember gripping the crucifix tighter than ever before, its cold surface grounding me in a reality that felt like a nightmare. Dracula was close now. The air itself seemed to shudder with his presence, like every shadow had grown teeth. He stood before me, tall and regal, his cloak flowing as if carried by an invisible wind. His eyes, crimson, glowing, hypnotic, fixed on mine. For a moment, I could not breathe. "Do you think your little trinkets will save you?" he whispered, his voice smooth and venomous. I forced my voice to remain steady. "I know they will. You are not as invincible as you pretend to be." And yet, inside, I doubted, would steel and faith be enough against centuries of darkness? "Tell me, if you had been in my place, would you have stood your ground or run?" The confrontation began. He lunged with unnatural speed, claws glinting like daggers. I raised the crucifix and thrust it forward. His face twisted with rage, smoke rising from his skin where the holy symbol burned him. The room filled with a shriek so terrible that I felt it in my bones. But he didn't stop. He circled me, faster than my eyes could follow, like a predator toying with prey. Every second stretched like an eternity. I grabbed the wooden stake I had carved earlier. Its weight felt insignificant compared to the burden of the moment. With one swift movement, I raised it high. Dracula lunged again, and I drove the stake directly into his chest. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then, an explosion of shadows. His scream was not human. It was a sound of centuries unraveling, of curses breaking apart. His body convulsed, then turned to ash, scattering across the floor like dark snow. The silence that followed was absolute. The castle itself seemed to sigh in relief, freed from his grip. I fell to my knees, exhausted, the crucifix slipping from my hand. I had survived, but survival did not feel like victory. Because somewhere in the back of my mind, I wondered, what if this was not the end? What if Dracula's essence still lingered, waiting to return? And now, let me ask you directly. Do you think evil like that can ever truly be destroyed? Or does it only wait for another night, another victim, another story? If you've been holding your breath through this tale, it's time to act. Hit that like button if you want more stories of the creatures that haunt the night. Subscribe if you're brave enough to follow me into the next legend. And tell me in the comments, would you dare to spend a night inside Dracula's castle, knowing what you know now? Because this was only one story, and there are many more shadows waiting for us.